In this session, we are going to talk a little bit about Southern Europe's point of view, Southern Europe's challenge in this crisis of competitiveness in some way. And I think it's very important. And it's not just talking about us, because I think where the crisis is, where the crisis gets hardest, is where the solutions will come to be. Okay, we have four panelists. Fernando Fernandez is our first panelist. He's a professor, he's a consultant, he's an expert in finance, and he will talk us a little bit about how Spain, which is probably the most important example of this crisis in Southern Europe, how Spain sees the crisis, what he sees from his point of view. Then we will have José Luis Curbelo. José Luis Curbelo has a long experience. He has been working abroad. He has been in international institutions. He's also a good friend of mine, but don't take that into account. And he's the manager of the Basque Institute of Competitiveness, and he gives us the doctrine that we later put into policies, okay, or some of it at least. Maybe he can comment on that. Then we have Pedro Gómez Damborenea, Pedro Antonio Merino, who is also a professor. He has been in academics, in finance, a little bit, but he's he's now working for the private sector. Okay, he's working for Repsol, which is one of our multinationals, and he will see what from the point of view of a company that has a global market, that works in global markets, how he sees what are the challenges of working based in Spain. Okay, and last but not least, Pedro Gómez Damborenea, who works with me in the department. He's the head of the strategic planning vice ministry, and he's also responsible for the policies on clusters and setting up all the horizontal policies in the department. And he will speak a little bit about how the Basque country has channeled the challenges of this crisis and how we have been partially successful at least. Without more wait, please, Fernando Fernandez, please.
Hello, good morning. First of all, thank you to the TCI for inviting me and to Orchestra, and in particular to José Luis Curbelo, who is responsible for social phenomena. So I guess the problem in this channel, in this panel, is that we're all friends. Nevertheless, I'm sure we have different points of view, so it'll be interesting anyway. So what I want to do in these 10-15 minutes is give you sort of an overview of what I call competitiveness in context. And this has to do with where we are today in the world economy and where is Spain today. And I start from the last annual meeting of the World Bank and IMF, where I think there are two ideas came to very clear. One is the economic outlook is very depressive. There's a clearly downside. All forecasts have been revised downwards for all over the world. However, it's not true that the world is not growing. Let me take from the very beginning issue with some of the points I heard in the previous conference. I do not think that we will not see growth. We are seeing growth. It just happens that growth is happening somewhere else. Growth is not happening in North Atlantic, growth is not happening in Europe, growth is not happening in Spain, growth is not happening in the Basque country, but there is growth in the world. And we better get used to that, because I think this is basically what has changed and what makes us reflect and be so puzzled about what to do with the economic situation. The second question that comes from the IMF meeting is the end of the post-crisis concessions. Or again, you want to put it for many years after 2008, after the crisis, it was clear that everything was possible. We had to do everything in monetary policy, we had to do everything in fiscal policy, we had to do everything in competitiveness policy. Every instrument, every tool of economics had to be displayed to get out of this crisis. Now, there are questions. There are questions: how far is austerity gone? Is it gone too much? How much can we continue to finance the deficit? Is it reasonable to expect some large countries to be able to sustain these high levels of debt, etc., etc.? And there are two main macro risks. One is the euro crisis, and we'll not dwell into that. I'm sure you all are very aware of what the situation is. Let me just say that I do think we're at a crossroad, we're at a turning point, and that very soon Europe has to decide whether it thinks the euro was a bad idea and therefore it will wake up, or that it was a very good idea and they will have to complete it. And complete it means we have to move decisively forward towards a banking union, a fiscal union, and eventually some sort of political union. Either of those two ways, I'm afraid we will see it very soon. Very soon being any time between 3 months to 3 years. But I'm sure that the current situation cannot continue very long. That's one risk. And the second risk, of course, is the US cliff. Like some data, of course, I'm an economist without a chart, you know, an economist. So I data how the outlook has been revised downward, and as you can see, the euro area periphery, this is us, by the way, in Southern Europe and certainly here, is the one where the economic outlook is more depressing. Second chart has to do with the global imbalances. And as most of you probably know, the world is a very special place where those who are rich do not save and those who are poor save. Or put it a different way, most of the savings from the world come from either oil-producing economies, the countries that save are the ones that have a surplus balance of payments, the one up here, and the ones that consume the resources, that spend the resources from the other countries are the ones down here. And we see here that the countries that save and provide savings for us to spend are basically the oil-producing economies, and it changed. It's rather constant, although it has to do with, of course, the price of oil. This sort of orange pink, whatever color this is China, essentially the emerging markets, which is providing the resources from the world. And there are only 2 developed economies that save, which is Germany and Japan. And that's why when we look at Europe, or the Eurozone, then it's all very complicated, because the only one really that saves is Japan, Germany, sorry, up here, and the red one. The pink are the other, the Netherlands, Austria, Finland. We have a little surplus in balance, but they are so small in macro terms. And everybody else used to be using the resources. And the problem, of course, is that the traditional economic way of dealing with these imbalances is with the exchange rate. And we don't have a exchange rate in the euro area. So we have to figure out what to do with these imbalances within the euro area, and we may have to think about restoring the exchange rate. By the way, I do think it's a very bad idea to restore the exchange rate as a way to look for competitiveness. I do not think that one gains competitiveness by evaluation. But the question is there, and it will be there with us as long as the charts are remain. Funny enough, and this is a picture that I think very few people have been aware of, if you look at the trade within the euro area, we're doing very well. Spain is actually rebalancing its trade balance within the euro area, at the same time that Germany is suffering from the recession in the euro area and is not exporting to the euro area anymore. If anything, because private consumption, obviously, in the euro area has come down. But if we look outside the euro area, then the picture does not well. Germany has been able to maintain its competitiveness, its export performance, even with quote-unquote a strong euro. And Spain has not done bad, hasn't done bad. I mean, we've sort of managed to stabilize the situation. Now, one question that's important in terms of location of growth and location of companies, and I think it has to do a little bit, I thought it had to do a lot with this, the thing with this conversation. What is the consumer going to do? Because at the end we produce for people who finally buy those goods. Well, I took a chart from the a working paper from the OECD, and what we see here is that the share today, 2009, of the middle class, which is all the average consumer, well, we see basically today it's in Europe and North America. 36% of the consumers, the middle class is in Europe, 18% is in North America. Now, in 2030, which is only 15 years or 18 years from now, we will go down from 54% together, Europe and North America, to 21%. Asia, by the way, will go up from 28% to 66%. So this is the people that will be consuming. So this is the people we have to think in terms of what goods are we going to produce, how we're going to market them, to whom are we going to put it in place. This is the people that are driving the economic, picture. Another way to look at it, and this comes from the research department of BBVA, amazing. 57.9% of the growth in the world economy from 2010 to 2020 will come from Asia, almost 60%, which means that 6 out of every 10 cars that will be sold in the world will be sold in Asia. 6 out of 10 every telephone lines, 6 out of 10 cellular phones, 6 out of 10 iPads that will be sold in the world will be sold in Asia. In Europe, 5.8%. I didn't put the data for Spain because it was that small, it was so small we would be a little upset. Now, quickly on Spain, this is a picture of what the Spanish economy looks like. I'm sure you all would agree. Every indicator is going down. Now we have stabilized down here, minus 0.3, minus 0.4, I wouldn't argue with that. The question is, can we change this? I mean, can we avoid it to flush down the toilet? I think the issue, very quickly on this, because some of the speakers will develop a little bit on this. I think 3 things have to happen. First of all, we have to do adjustment policies, clearly, and we are doing adjustment policies, but adjustment policies are not enough. I don't think the issue in Spain is adjustment or growth. I think the issue is adjustment and growth. We cannot expect to continue having the level of debt that we were having, and we cannot continue in the world to be willing to finance this level of debt. And of course, we have to do financial reform, labor market reform, but it's time for pro-growth policies. When I said we cannot count on the world willing to finance ourselves, let me put quickly a chart on the performance of the Spanish debt. This is the performance of the Spanish public debt to GDP ratio. If you look at the slope of the curve, the economists love slopes of the curves. It's not so much about the numbers, but the speed at which the things grow. This is probably the fastest growing slope in OECD countries by far, and one of the most significant. If you look at this chart here, if you can see this is a problem that is common to all advanced economies. All advanced economies, the debt to GDP ratio is growing very much. However, the emerging economies are not only not increasing the debt, but they're reducing the debt. And remember, these are the people that we're counting on them to finance our debt. The problem is they're getting tired of financing our public debt. To give you an idea of what is happening in the Spanish economy, if you compare this crisis with the previous crisis, the euro crisis in 1992, the red line is the behavior of real GDP in year 0, the year of the crisis in 1992, the behavior of GDP before the crisis, the magnitude of the crisis, and the recovery, right? This is what we have now. 40 years after the crisis, this is where GDP is, 93% in stock. If we look at credit, same thing. Credit today is 90% of what it was before. However, the leveraging of the, I know a lot of people think of the Spanish economy suffering from a credit crunch, which is true, and a lot of companies suffering because there's no credit, which is also true. But what is also true is that this credit crunch will continue. I'm afraid to say so. When you look at every indicator of every previous crisis, and this is a figure taken from the IMF report on the Spanish economy in July, what we see is that credit to GDP hasn't really started to increase yet. Any study that we have, I know many people look at economists as economic historians, we look at what has happened before and then we deduct what may happen in the future. What we have seen is any crisis normally results in reduction in the debt to GDP crisis of at least 20 percentage points, between 20 and 30. That's sort of standard economic thinking. We barely have started to reduce the debt to GDP ratio. This is a chart of competitiveness. That's only 2 more. This is probably something that most of you are familiar with. This is taken from the World Competitiveness Report 2012. This looks at the Spanish economy, where we are in terms of the innovation-driven economy. Innovation-driven economies, the profile is given by the black line. The blue line is Spain. Spain is good in market size for the time being. I won't give a comment on that. The macroeconomic environment used to be good, it isn't anymore. And everything else, we're below. Obviously, innovation, we rank poorly, but in terms of efficiency in the goods and markets, labor market efficiency, financial market development. So I have a lot of things to look at when you're designing micro-competitive policies. There are a lot of things that we have to look at. The roadmap is clear, but these things are very difficult to implement. You know, the advantage of those of us who deal with macro policies, that macro is very simple. Monetary, fiscal, there are 4 or 5 different tools, you do it and this is fine. You are able to sustain those policies. Micro policies are much more difficult. You have to do with changing the attitude of the social agents. You have to change the attitude of the entrepreneurs, of the business people. You have to change the attitude of the social workers. You have to change the attitude of policymakers, of regulators, and it's a lot more difficult. 3 points quickly on what I think are my priorities for Spain: a new energy policy. We cannot continue having prices of energy which are either a permanent subsidy, which relies on government debt being accumulated, or if we pass it on to consumers, then we'll have very high prices. So we have to get to a definition soon on whether we can afford the luxury of developing renewable energy at a very high cost to the consumer or the taxpayer. And we may find that we do want to do that, and then we have to decide who's going to pay for it, the taxpayer or the consumer, and then include it and do our projections based on that. Second, the amount of quality of regulation. Let me bring your attention to a report that most people have forgotten, unfortunately. At the European level, 1988, there was a famous report called the Cecchini report, dealing with the cost of non-Europe. This was the time of the single market. This was the time where Europe was going to, the European Union, was going to enter into the main, what I think is one of the 2 building blocks of what today is the European Union, the single market and the monetary union. At that time, the cost of not going ahead with the single market program, the cost of non-Europe, as it was framed at the time, was estimated at a level between 4 and 7% of GDP. Now, I'm not aware of anybody who's been brave enough or courageous enough to do that same exercise in Spain. The cost of internal regulations in terms of foregone GDP. But I was very surprised if we don't get a figure, at least in the order of magnitude of half that much. We have to realize that we have developed all sorts of internal barriers to the single market, and we have to change that. And the only way to change that, to be honest, is through the principle, which is also copied from Europe, the principle of the single passport. That is, any regional government, any autonomous government that passes any legislation on any sector will immediately, any company that meets that regulation will immediately have the authority to work under the same regulation all across the territory of Spain. This is basically what the financial industry, how the financial industry in Europe was developed with the single passport procedure, and many other industries in Europe have considered that. Okay, and education, quickly. I think we've done we're investing, as you know, investing in human capital has also externalities, private benefits, etc. OECD, of course, basically comes to an agreement in which 50% of the benefit of a higher education is private, 50% is public, roughly speaking. And there are all sorts of discussions, but we can imagine that is the number. In Spain, still today, 15% of the cost of university education is paid by the individual, 85% is paid by the taxpayer. However, the benefit, as I said, is at least 50%. There's room for increasing universities. I know this is not very popular. I know it will make me the most famous person these days in this country, but unless we face the reality that we have a subsidy system which is clearly unfair, we have the lower middle class subsidizing the upper middle class and upper class, which is contrary to what we have done for the last 25 years. I think we've catered to the real good industrial policy for small and medium enterprises, as a friend of mine told me yesterday, is to make sure they are not small in the next 10 years. That's what we should do. Thank you very much, and sorry for taking the time.
Good morning. Well, moving out of Europe and talking out of Europe and talking about Spain, I'm going to concentrate my analysis in what the characteristics of the competitiveness policy of the Basque Country have been during the last 30 years. We want to make a snapshot of what the Basque Country is. We could say that the Basque Country is a small, prosperous, and industry-based economy. As a population is very small, 2.2 million people, smaller than most of many of the neighborhoods of many of the countries in which you are coming from. So we have to realize we are a very small country. The area is also a very small area that even if we introduce that is mountainous and with valleys and so on, it's a very small economy. The GDP per capita, however, is very high. Is is over 31,000 euros, much beyond the European average, also much beyond the Spanish average. Unemployment, though rising, is around 12%, the European average, and is half of that in Europe. And manufacturing, and that is a very important thing because I will say it is the motor around the industrial policy, the competitiveness policy in the Basque Country, is a very important sector. It represents around 23-25% of the GDP, and if we introduce the service activities related with the industrial sector, we will have almost 50 or even a little bit over 50% of the GDP is related to industry and manufacturing. So that is the Basque Country economy in a snapshot. The Basque economy has been evolving since the 1980s in a very astonishing way. It is an economy that outperformed the evolution of most economies during the last 30 years. As I said before, the GDP, that is this blue. There are two blues, but the darker blue, the continuous blue, is the evolution of the GDP per capita of the Basque Country vis-a-vis Europe, the rich Europe, the Europe of the 15th, and Spain. And as you see, during many years, even Spain, the Basque Country was closing the gap with the United States average. So the Basque economy has been performing very, very well during the last 30 years, years in which, except for the last few years, Spain also performed very, very well. So what is the reason for this differential behavior? By the way, the Basque economy is, as I said before, is having currently a very strong crisis. The newspaper is full of news about companies laying off workers, but still we have an employment level that is half of the Spanish average. And that is a very interesting thing because in the last crisis, the unemployment in the Basque Country was twice as much as the Spanish average. So there is a clear changing tendency here. So the Basque economy, the Basque companies are more resilient. Someone was talking before about resilience. And I would say that there are a lot of things that justify this resilience. When you have an industrial economy, an economy based on manufacturing, that you have to train people for the entrepreneurs or for the firms is very costly and very inefficient to lay off people if they can keep them as much as possible. So that is one of the reasons probably why the Basque unemployment has been relatively resilient vis-a-vis the behavior of other sectors in the rest of Spain. I will say also that something differential of the evolution of the Basque economy is that though we are now in a situation of course, very small or decreasing GDP per capita, still the government has been able to maintain investments in education, in maintaining investment in research and development. So contrary to the rest of Spain, these two items and some other items, but these two important items for the topic that we are addressing here have been very well addressed from my point of view from the government. So there is an important consensus here that some things had not to be condemned because of you need certain adjustments. And this has been, I would say, very, very important because at the end, like my predecessor was talking, is something similar to the vocational training. Here was always the idea that there were a few things that were fundamental for the competitiveness of the region in the longer term. And one of those is keeping as much as possible research and development, keeping as much as possible education, keeping as much as possible vocational training. Of course, there is lots of room for improvement. Many times it's not the amount of money that you spend there. You have to work also in the efficiency of the system. But at the end, you have to keep a path about what priorities are. All of us have studied that in a budget, at the end, you summarize the priorities of the government. And I think that here are clearly differential to whatever happened in other places. As I said, the key element has been that the Basque Country has had a very active industrial policy all along the years. It began in the 80s. Someone said before that the clusters were before the cluster concept was created, and I would say it's true. But the reality is that in the 80s, the Basque economy had to be totally restructured. The Basque economy was an economy based on the old sectors. If you see this place, this was a shipyard. This was rusty, dirty, and with a lot of social mobilization in a period of which riots were there in the street. I used to live across the street, and that was many times you couldn't go from one part of the other, from the one part of the city to the other, because riots were, or probably were in the riots, but at the end, there was a real barrier in an economy that was falling apart. At that time, there was a very important institutional consensus. When I say institutional consensus, is that both the central government and the regional government that was being created at that time when the transition to democracy in Spain, both of them worked together and they spent a lot of money to restructure the Basque economy in the context of the restructuring of the Spanish economy. So it was a lot of investments to restructure, to readjust, and to maintain as much as possible of the industrial base and building the basis for the future. And so is where, with a strong leadership of the regional government at the time, were created the first technological parks, the first technology center, and so on and so forth. An agency that has been very influential in all the industrial policy in the Basque Country was created. It is the SPRI. At that time, the name of SPRI means restructuring of the Basque economy. So this agency today maintains the name. SPRI maintains the name, but today it's called for the competitiveness, for the competitive transformation. So has been also a change from restructuring an economy to transform an economy in a competitive way. During the 90s is where you can say once the economy moved from reactive problem-solving strategy, during the 90s were created the basis for a real industrial policy looking forward with a strategic approach. The idea was to boost the economy and to think in the long run. At that time, of course, the two issues that were relevant were quality and cluster ties. The idea was be competitive, producing well, producing better, and producing cheaper. And to be in a global economy, producing well, producing better, and producing cheaper, whatever you knew how to produce, you have to strengthen all the quality and all the elements related to be a first-class producer of the traditional sectors that you had. And also you move to sectors that were somehow related to the previous sectors, but that had some type of vicinity, technological vicinity with them. So were the years in which aeronautics began to be pushed for, automotive components, machine tools, eolic energy, appliances, and so on and so forth. They were the new sectors that at the end grew up out of the specialization that the region had. And also were years of urban renewal. This area of the city, all the other cities, Vitoria, San Sebastian, the same, the Guggenheim Museum. So there were years in which there were a real long-term approach to development and to the future of the Basque economy. What happened now in the new millennium? The new millennium is here, of course, and the approach focused in quality cannot last forever. So there is a moment in which quality is not enough and you have to introduce other types of approaches. Efficiency, you are already efficient, but you have to produce different things. So you have to introduce knowledge and other type of inputs in innovation in the production processes. Especially when you have countries in which territories don't specialize anymore in a sector, but they specialize in certain phases of the value chain. So here you have that the knowledge is the essential element to allocate activities to the different territories. So here is where the Basque Country has been during the last 15 years pushing a lot for the establishment of innovation-driven strategies. Agencies were created. The InnoBasque is the Basque Agency for Innovation was created. Orchestra was created. It's not casual that at the end it's not a matter of fortune that you create orchestra. Orchestra was created somehow to have people researching about what the paths for growth, for competitiveness are for the Basque Country within a global economy. So there was a long-term approach coming out of the different agents, private and public, that were moving in the economy. Also, there was a big push for improving the technological infrastructure. More technology centers were created, improved the qualification of the human resources, both at the top tier and also keeping and maintaining vocational training, always keeping this dual system. Important, I would say that if you have to qualify things, I would say the second tier has been very much differential because it has been also relatively efficient, much more efficient than the university system, that at the end is a bureaucratic system and so on, and has all the complexities that we know of traditional universities. And also was, especially during the last few years, a big push for internationalization. But internationalization understood not only with as you have to sell abroad whatever you produce, but also you have to produce abroad whatever the consumers want to consume abroad. And also, and very important, you have to attract investment, you have to attract talent, you have to be an attractive place for people to produce here. Especially when you move, many of you know, here was a region that for years we have terrorism, we don't have terrorism, so many of the barriers that the region had to attract people, to attract investments are being removed. So the government and the authorities and the different agents are pushing for an internationalization of the Basque economy in the both ways. Also, I will say I will emphasize the idea of horizontal initiatives. Especially during the last years, I already talked that previously a very strong cluster policy was developed. Cluster associations were created. Cluster associations got powerful and got influential in the respective sectors or areas of activity. And the new idea is to have horizontal cooperation among different cluster structures. So there is a lot of emphasis in intercluster cooperation to cope with challenges like mobility, like aging, like all the challenges that you have, and they are not sectoral. The concepts of sector, even if it's defined as a cluster, remain relatively close or relatively small. So has been a push for horizontal cooperation in the cluster policy. Of course, later on someone will talk about the cluster policy and I will not emphasize much more on that. And also have been horizontal initiatives for enabling general purpose technology initiatives, creating emphasizing the areas of bioscience, nanoscience, advanced manufacturing, somehow very much into the idea that was talking early in the morning about smart specialization strategies, how you evolve from whatever you know how to do to different areas of activity that are closely related with whatever you know, and somehow you have to introduce innovation to move from one area of specialization to another. So here is one of the reasons why I say the Basque Country is in the right path in all this, for implementing these ideas of the European Union of smart specialization. So, I will say finally, or almost closing to my speech, that from the very beginning in the Basque Country have been explicit or implicit territorial strategy based upon an active and evolving industrial policy. Making things. Yesterday in Guipúzcoa in San Sebastian, I made the reference that Basque people like to make things, touching things. So I think that that is a very important characteristic of the regional economy. And also the strong public leadership. Private-public partnerships have worked here. Probably because here is a region with a lot of social capital. We have had probably, or the Basque Country has had, with all the controversies, political controversies, are very much a facilitating state, that somehow we'll say. All the government have been able to establish public-public relationship, private-private, public-public, but somehow ideas that the public sector have are not taking at the rain that is raining outside are relevant. My colleagues at the Institute have written recently a very interesting book that is Strategies for the Construction of Regional Competitive Advantages. Have been written only in Spanish, but I would say it's a book worthwhile to read. It's being translated now into English, so I would say that it's going to be a very interesting thing to analyze how for the Basque strategy or the Basque model has been not an accumulation of policies, has been an underlying strategy trying to build on the strength, long-term strength of the region itself. Somehow, as a conclusion, and also to talk about the challenges, this is also a region full of challenges, is that strategy and policy must be constantly evolving to take on board new challenges. And the new challenges, as we have here this morning, is we are an economy that in our environment is not going to grow, but growth exists. So we have to understand that growth is someplace, and we have to accommodate our economy to a growth that is happening someplace else. And that probably we are not in the best of the positions to compete in many of the arenas. One of them is, as was said by my colleague Fernando, is the Basque economy is full of small and medium enterprises, but are very, very small. Are very small in the sector. Economies are not have a small. The companies are not big or small by the amount of people that work in a company or by the equity that they have. Companies are big or small in relationship to the competitors. And we have made at the Institute an analysis, and we have been analyzing the different sectors and subsectors of the Basque economy, and we have found that, analyzing, I would say that were 41 sectors, all but 3 were too small in relation to the European competitors. So we have to address that we have an economy that is very small, and that for the challenges, that one of the challenges is how you introduce technology and innovation. There are natural barriers there, so you have to confront size. And as I said, and in that case, I share the opinions of my friend Fernando, only in this thing, not in many other things, is that at the end, most of the policies that we have in all the countries, in all the places, is to protect small companies. And probably we should question if the idea is to protect or to make these companies to grow to a level in which they can compete fairly in the international economy. 3 challenges that we identify. By the way, there is a report. There are some copies over there. Of course, you will find in the orchestra web page is a report on the competitiveness of the Basque economy for the year 2011. We make a diagnosis of the Basque economy. And one of the things that we found is that the Basque economy is very close. It's a very endogamic society. And today, Carlos Hartel has been talking about the problems of endogamy, how you grow wherever you have talent, and wherever you have talent, that is coming from everywhere. And that is one of the things that we have to address. This is a country in which the universities produce not enough people, and people have to be attracted. And many times we put the society, the political system and so on, put artificial barriers to the movement of people. So we have to address and we have to remove barriers for the movement of people, especially for people with talents that, as it was said before, these people move from one place to the other. We have to move engineers, we have to attract engineers, because there are not enough engineers here, there is not enough technicians here. So that is a problem, openness. The economy has to improve openness and outward connectivity. Also, we have to address, especially with lack of scarce resources, the efficiency of the innovation system. We have a very strong innovation system that has been analyzed by the OECD and is first class and is used as an example, but it's full of inefficiencies. So there are room for improvement. So we have to address those issues. We have to confront ourselves to those issues. The fact of being good, it doesn't mean that you don't have to improve. You have room for improvement, and probably you are in a better position to improve in the future. And third is the reinforce the already existing path towards the intelligent diversification of the productive system. It's more the specialization strategies that were talked before by the people from the European Commission. The topic of the next competitiveness report of Orchestra will be that one, will be as 3 systems, smart specialization strategies and the room for this intelligent diversification within the Basque economy. Thank you very much, and ready for later on if we have comments, sharing opinions and sharing probably controversies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, José Luis. Now, Pedro Antonio, it's your turn. Well, we have to go a little bit faster because otherwise I think you all want to eat, not today, so we have to cope with reality.
Hello. It is a pleasure to be here and to share with you my views on the competitiveness of the Spanish economy, or probably put it in other words, the problem of the lack of competitiveness. But before that, I've been paying attention to my friend José Luis' presentation about the success of the Basque model, because it was an industrial-based economy, and 3 days ago I was asked by my boss, make me a presentation about what is going really well in Spain. And then I said, well, tourism is not doing that bad, but I have one slide which is very good. Of the 10 best restaurants of the world, 3 are Spaniards and 2 are in the Basque country. I said, well, okay, but is it the only thing you have found? He said, no, but I'm sure that I'm going to the Basque country, probably they know, but there's something else apart from industrial-based economy. I have less time than my previous speakers. I'm used to, because they always talk a lot. I'm fair of them, and I have to tell you that I will spend more time than I have spent here listening to them twice, because I'm always learning from them. My presentation is what Krugman said. Everything is productivity and competitiveness. And I'm going to give you a short view of how I see the main ideas about the productivity problem in Spain, the main ideas about the competitive problem in Spain, and if I have time, one example of how we address competitive problems in our company, and we were very successful, or we think we were very successful, and the market thought also. And just to add another problem to the productivity and competitive cost competitive problem, we have in Spain another problem, and Fernando was addressing that partially. It's financing cost competitiveness. Spain now have a problem because our companies cannot compete on an equal footing with any other country which have companies with a cost of financing their debt or their investment which is, I would say, at least 300 basis points less than we have. It's not that Telefónica or so is not doing well abroad, it's that the cost of financing any project is linked to the cost of the sovereign risk in Spain. So, labor productivity. Okay, you can see graphs. When you see the bottom part of the graph, you see that productivity is not increasing in Spain, but that was not a problem, because we were producing houses, and with that level of productivity, we were able to sell more houses at an annual increase of 20% each year. So why you are going to insist in increasing productivity when the present productivity you are making a lot of money? Okay, you can see US, you can see Europe, you can see Spain. So partially, we should be very positive, because 50% of the difference in productivity between Spain and Eurozone plus the three categories, the European Union 15, partially 49% is explained only by the fact that we were very much involved, very much biased to the construction sector and the surrounding sector. So only 50% of the productivity gap in Spain is linked to general issues. Okay, general issues mean that we are at least a little bit less productive on average than our colleagues in Europe. No? In the industry, you can see Spain, it's lower in industry than the Euro 15, agriculture, machinery, energy, we will need a conference on this, wholesale and retail trade, everything but finance and finance intermediation. We are very good at finance intermediation, we are very productive, not only because we are productive, but because it was a business that was growing at a pace of 25%. So we invest a lot in having one of the best financial systems in intermediating operations. Okay, there are many explanations for this lack of productivity in the whole economy. One of it is about size. Fernando was mentioning. You have here the labor productivity of firms. The big columns, the dark blue columns are big companies, plus 250 people. As you can see, we are more productive on average than the same type of companies in the UK and the same type of company in Germany. It is not the case in medium companies, but it's about the same level of productivity, and you can see here that there are not big differences in productivity, except, I'm going to try to do with this, I don't know if you want to, except for the smaller. And when I say smaller, it's 1 to 9. José Luis was mentioning, and I have two ideas about this. No? One is the graph, which is on the left. Okay, this one. "92% of our companies are micro companies, defined by the fact that they have less than 9 people working. This is the big difference in the Spanish company field vis-a-vis UK or Germany. And also, although we are very productive in our big companies, the number of big companies and the people working for big companies is smaller. It's only 0.1% of firms compared to 0.5% of big companies in Spain. So small companies on the one hand, sectorial differences on the other, and then what can we say about the future of competitiveness that I think is innovation and, well, and small and medium enterprises becoming a little bit bigger. Well, you have here that our small and medium enterprises, and this is Spain, this is not the Basque country, which is an example for many other regions in Spain, is that innovating in-house, small and medium enterprises that really innovate are very, very low in Spain. Also, those companies who really make their life from new products, it's very low. You have the graph, and you can see that only approximately 10% of our small and medium companies have innovated in-house, and only 25–30% get their money from new products, from new lines of production. So all in all, we have a problem of productivity, which is on the one hand sectorial, and on the other it has to do with innovation. You have here research and development productivity. So how many patents, which are usually in the US, in Europe and in Japan, are done per million of inhabitants in Spain? As you can see, the graph is quite clear. You have the average of the European Union, you have Germany, you have France, you have the Netherlands, and then Spain. Spain is the lowest in this type of registering patents. So I have 2 or 3 more minutes. Let me explain this, which is the summary of the cost. Spain has a problem because even with productivity, even with innovation, you need to put your costs where they were before the bubble. Here you have GDP deflator. GDP deflator tells you about the price not only of exporting things, but of what is the cost of anything produced here, and you are having problem of internal competitiveness because everything is going to be imported. You have, in this case, Germany, France, and I always use Ireland and Spain to show you that although Spain is trying to control, trying to put a lid on its price evolution, still we need to, I would say, reduce by between 10 and 20% the difference in price evolution. I used the GDP deflator, as you can see, Ireland after the crisis began to reduce its GDP deflator, while Spain only stabilized. So we have still a problem of price competitiveness. We are doing things in terms of unit level cost because we're firing people, and then the sectorial change implies that we are regaining competitiveness in labor unit cost. But as you can see, and this is the last graph on the external sector of the Spanish economy, still, when you use the export of goods service as the basis, the price deflator for these goods is still quite high compared to our competitors. We have regained some competitiveness. We have regained because we are exporting more value-added products, but still we have a problem of prices. This is the only graph on the. It's quite nice, the graph. It's not because I have done. It's because you have Portugal, you have Italy and Spain, and you have Deutschland and Germany and France. This is the cost of the CDS, the CDS, the cost of defaulting, of assuring against default. And you can see that below, the cost for French companies and German companies is quite similar. This is banks. We have this. We can do the same with energy companies, with any type of companies, and this is the cost. For a Spanish company and an Italian company, the cost is double, and for a Portuguese company, is triple. This is the same graph, and in this case, what you have is industrial companies. So let me say that Spain is doing its part in terms of increasing its exports, but as I told you, looking forward, if you have a sector which amounted to 20% of the final demand in Spain was construction, you have to find any other sector to take the lead and to increase employment. For the time being, we are doing well in exports, but as I told you, there is still productivity problem, there is still competitiveness problem. And this is my last, and I think that I'm going to do it in 11 minutes, so 50% less extra time than my previous unexperienced colleagues. imagine that you are in a company and you have a macroeconomist who really gives you a presentation of what's going on, the price of oil, things like that. And then you say, well, there's one thing which can change the company. We are a company, an oil company, but we are one of the biggest companies, or one of the oil companies in Europe which have less oil, which produce less oil. So let's do a bold bet. Let's invest in exploration. You can see here that the success of the Spanish, of the Repsol competitiveness is linked to increasing its expertise and increasing investment in exploration. That means a lot of engineers, geologists for seismic interpretation, and also a lot of money of our present capabilities invested in exploration. What you have here is, of the total CAPEX, how much of the money is invested in exploration. Probably you're not familiar with the sector, but you can see companies who said we are investing in exploration, but they are really investing either in development of the present fields or in production. Now, as you can see, the orange line is how Repsol was increasing since 2006 its exploration CAPEX. And this has been a success because now a big chunk of our business is abroad, and a big chunk of our business is based on the development of innovation. As I told you, geophysics, is interpretation, and is engineering. As I told you, to finalize, there are 3 questions in Spain. What is productivity? And it's linked to size companies and to the lack of innovation in practically all the companies. But there is still something is, for a country with the unemployment that we have and which had a bubble in the construction sector and a sector which probably has disappeared for many years, we need to find new sectors. And the only way forward is not only through productivity and innovation, but through competitiveness, cost competitiveness. And I think we are doing part of the work, but still there's a lot to be done. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello, good morning everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I am the representative of the government, of the Basque government, of the policy makers, and I will try to give you an idea of what we are doing in the Basque country. And I have to thank the previous speakers because they have focused the attention in the funny, strange, particular situation of the Basque country if we compare with other Spanish regions. But before explaining you some things of our competitiveness policy, I would like to show you a video to give you an idea of what the Basque country, of what we are talking about, of what the Basque country looks like. Thank you. Right.
The Basque Country is a region located in northern Spain, on the border with France, with a high quality of life. The per capita income of the Basque Country stands at almost $43,500 US, placing it in 23rd position out of a total of 271 European regions. 6 out of every $10 of its budget are allocated to health and education. Among European regions, it ranks 7th in terms of numbers of university graduates. In spite of the fact that the Basque Country represents only 4% of the population in Spain, it accounts for 9% of Spanish exports and 6.2% of its GDP. Taking the average productivity per employed person in the EU as 100, that of the Basque Country would be 132. Large multinational companies such as Mercedes, Alcoa, Dresser-Rand, General Electric, Guardian, PepsiCo and Tenneco have set up businesses in the Basque Country. Coexisting alongside these companies, there are a number of local high-technology companies such as Iberdrola, Gamesa, ITP, Aernova, CAF and Mondragon, which is the largest cooperative group in Europe. In order to attract inward investment, the Basque government has created the Invest in the Basque Country area. The Basque Country has powers to regulate its own taxes and the authority to manage and collect them. The Basque Country is located in a strategic corridor between the Iberian Peninsula and the rest of Europe. By sea, it has two commercial ports, Bilbao and Pasajes. By air, Bilbao Airport offers regular flights to the main European capitals. Moreover, Vitoria Airport has the #2 perishables terminal in Europe. In just a few years, the Basque Country will be linked with Madrid and Paris via a high-speed train network. The Basque Country's economy is open to the world and has the highest employment rate anywhere in Spain. It has a consolidated system of cluster associations in 11 sectors. Through its promotion of R&D activities in recent years, it's been able to take part in a number of top-flight projects. In order to undertake these and other projects, the Basque Country has two major technology centers, IK4 and Tecnalia. The latter is one of the 5 most important centers in Europe. The Basque Country has adapted successfully to the modern era. Its 3 largest cities are eloquent proof of this. Following a number of transformations in the city's urban infrastructures, Bilbao has become a center for culture and tourism, unthinkable scarcely 20 years ago. The Guggenheim Museum is the best example of this. Vitoria has one of the highest rates of green areas per inhabitant in Europe. Next year, it will succeed Hamburg as European Green Capital. With its cinema and jazz festivals, San Sebastian will be European Cultural Capital in 2016. One of the main attractions of the Basque Country is its natural assets. The beaches and cliffs of its coastline, a dozen natural parks, adventure sports, and so on. It also has one of the best cuisines in the world. In recent years, the Basque Country has recorded some of the highest tourism levels in its history. One of the main sources of tourists of the Basque Country is the United States. For all these reasons, the Basque Country is your best ally.
Well, I think now you have a short perspective of what the Basque Country is like, and now I have the challenge to wake you up. I am the last speaker, and I will try to explain you our competitiveness policy. I'm not going to talk about the industrial history of the Basque Country because José Luis Curbelo has did that before, but I would like to explain to you that the situation of the Basque Country is the situation you have seen, because we have a plan, if we want to say. We have a long tradition of planning, and now we have the last business competitiveness plan was made 3 years ago. And this plan really is our guideline, the instrument we use to focus all our policies. Then we have 3 main axes in this plan. Of course, the first one is we want an open economy in the Basque Country. We are talking about internationalization, but we are talking also about to be open to other possibilities and to invite, as in the video you said, other regions to invest here, and of course to prepare our people to be competitive in the global world. And the other main edge is that we like to have an economy with good entrepreneurship. We would like to have a very good system of innovation and technology, and we really bet for that. We spend a lot of money in this matter. If we consider that we spend private if we add private and public effort in this field, in research and development, we spend more than 2% of our GDP in this matter. And this is, of course, over the average of Spain, but it's also over the average of the European Union. And we think this is very important. And of course, we would like to have a sustainable economy. this economy should be sustainable in environmental questions and also financially sustainable. And to develop this plan, we have two other plans which hang really from this one, which are the energy strategy. We have a very powerful sector in energy, and we have another one which is the science and technology plan. And with these instruments, I would like to explain to you a little bit what we are doing in the cluster and in other fields, but I am going to focus my presentation in the cluster policy. You should, everybody knows the clusters. We started with this policy in the 90s. We had, as José Luis Curbelo said before, a big crisis in the 80s. We had to rethink our economy, but we had an element very, very clear. We are industrial, we are very good manufacturing, and that's our value, and we don't have to renounce to that. And we are always pushing this matter, and we're pushing on developing and research for this purpose, because we think in this way we can guarantee the welfare of our population. Then the cluster system, I'm going to talk about the cluster system. The cluster system started in the 90s, we created a map, and during the 90s we developed 11 cluster associations. These cluster associations need two main conditions. They should work in the whole of the territory of the Basque country, and they should have a common interest. I know yesterday you visited some of the clusters, and you have some of the clusters, you visit some clusters, such as the energy cluster, which is recognized by our policy, but you also have the opportunity to see what we call natural clusters, such as the wine cluster, which is not recognized in our competitiveness model, but that exists, of course. And, we have clusters in many fields, such as household appliance, machine tools, automotive, electronics and information, the cluster of the port of Bilbao, environmental industries, energy, as I said before, aeronautics and space, Basque maritime industries, paper and audiovisuals. And these are the priority clusters. And the government helped these clusters, and in a way, I wouldn't like to say that we control, but we go with them. That's much better. We have in each council civil servants which take part in all the meetings of the board of directors that follow that the policies they are developing are really cooperation policies. And we think this is really a success. There are many things that are very difficult to evaluate, to know if, because they are intangibles, and the cooperation among different companies in the same sector sometimes it's very difficult to say if it's, how far it has gone. But the reality is that it's going, and we have big companies competing but cooperating at the same time. And then, for example, just to give you an example of the energy cluster, they have, in the energy cluster, we have 95 companies, and in these companies there are 23,000 workers. Probably this can give you an example of the power of our industry. I could give you more examples, but I think I don't have much time. The matters we work with the cluster basically are internationalization, technological innovation, management innovation, sustainable development, and other matters. But these are the main things we work with. We have to help the clusters. We have some strategic observatories to look for challenges in which our clusters could cooperate and compete, to identify opportunities. And well, as I said before, there are civil servants controlling, I don't like this word, helping the clusters, and the government help all these associations with funding. We spend in each cluster association 240 million euros. That's the top. that could be, I mean, that's the limit, no more. It could be less if they don't do practice to deserve that. There is a thing really, for us there are, as I said before, there are intangible results, but there are also tangible results of cooperation, such as things, policies we are trying to lead with the clusters, such as the electric vehicle or others. But at the same time, for us, the key of the indicators we have is the number of projects, the number and quality of the projects of cooperation launched by the different clusters. And this is basically the cluster policy. But I would like to say that a few years ago we thought that these clusters, these sectors, didn't represent the whole of the Basque industry, and we thought that it was a good idea to spread it, to open it to other sectors. And then we created the figure of the pre-cluster. We created the pre-cluster. And they do the same thing of the clusters, they have less funding, and they are in a way learning. But the government has the same relation with them than with the clusters. And now we have 11 pre-clusters. Probably you've seen in the video and probably in some other presentations that we have 9, but just yesterday I signed the recognition of 2 new pre-clusters. Then we have 11 pre-clusters. And we have pre-clusters in different areas such as foundries, diapers, habitat and contract, food, bioscience, hand-tool manufacturers and steel producers, construction cluster and mobility and logistics. And I hope that maybe in a couple of weeks we will be able to say that we are going to have a new cluster. 3 of these pre-clusters are working together to make possible the birth of a new cluster. This will be the cluster of metallurgy, and will merge in a way as a kind of federation the foundries association, the diapers forging, and the steel producers. And we have started last year. We decided that our cluster system was going rather well. We have a big cooperation among the different companies inside our cluster, and we decided to push a new policy, the intercluster cooperation policy. This is the first year we are starting. We are learning. The clusters are learning. The government is learning also. But we want not the associations, not a cooperation among the different associations, but we would like a cooperation among the companies which are in each association. They have presented some programs to the government. We are evaluating them, and I think this is one of the challenges we have in this cluster policy for the future. Another of the challenges we have is cooperation with other regions. For us, it's very important to have here the TCA. We think it's an opportunity for us. And, of course, we have to consolidate this per-cluster activity I mentioned before. I would like just to finish telling you that for us, industry is really very important. We bet for industry. You should think that Spain, we are only 6% of the Spanish population, but we are almost 10% of the Spanish industry. That can give you an idea of the situation. And of course, our figures, debt, deficit, many other macroeconomic figures that have been mentioned are rather better than in other Spanish regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro. We have just a very short time for discussion. Well, it's a pity because I think our panelists did a magnificent job. I think I will put some questions. Maybe we can continue while having lunch. Okay, discussing. Well, one of the issues that came up across was the size of our companies. And well, I always have a problem of knowing if it's the chicken or the egg. Okay, what comes first? I mean, we have companies because we work a different way, and that's why we have small companies, and therefore making them larger just by itself will not work, or is it because we have smaller companies that our productivity is low? I will give you one. I'm responsible Pedro is responsible for the cluster policy. I'm responsible for the technological policy, and we have a big challenge because we spend almost 2%, 2.8%, 2.08% of the GDP in technology. However, this 2.08%, almost 60% is spent by firms, and out of this 60%, 70% is spent by SMEs, which is, I think, a great achievement. Because comparatively in Europe, like Sweden or Finland or Germany, it's close to 30%. Okay, so most of the money is spent, and we spend this is spent by SMEs. Also because we have no big companies, okay? So I think this is something that maybe you could comment if it's the chicken or the egg, and how would you go about? Because it's very easy to say what you said.
Okay. Let me say clearly, I don't know whether the chicken or the egg. What I do know is that the policy, labor market policies, industrial policies, all across Spain, and I would assume also in the Basque Country. I don't know the specifics, I have to admit. I don't know the specifics of the Basque Country, but I would say it's probably in that respect the same, has been geared towards making sure small enterprises remain small. For example, social security reductions in social security contributions for companies are geared towards small and medium enterprises. So if you are above a certain number of employees, then you don't get that much. That was the standard labor market policy every year. In many, I don't know, again, I don't know the specifics in the Basque Country, but in many applications for public funds for R&D, you get more points if you're a small and medium enterprise than if you're a large enterprise. So in a way, part of the subsidies or the complement, whatever you want to call it, the public funds geared toward R&D are specifically linked to the size of the company. And I think the problem really is how we promote the companies to grow, because this is not Spain. All across international comparisons show you that larger firms export more, and we do have an export problem. Larger firms innovate more. I don't believe in this idea that big innovations are developed in a small garage in the famous story, or a little garage in Palo Alto, or Microsoft was created. That's not true. Some individual had an idea in a garage, but then he created an empire that required a lot of people working with him, a lot of market experts, a lot of financial experts, not only technicians, not only engineers, to get from the idea stage to the project and to the business application stage and to the third stage. You need size, you need money, you need people, you need resources. And this to me is very clear. I mean, when you look at every indication all across the world, size is related to export and growth and innovation.
Okay, Antonio.
If you allow me some comments, I think, as you said, is the chicken or the egg problem. We don't have, there's no problem with the chicken or egg problem. So you can know the chicken or the egg. But there's one thing in Spain which is different in the Basque Country, and it's the industrial sector in Spain is only 14%. So our micro companies are not only in the industrial sector, but in any other sector. And one thing is the fact that our industry has become, as a proportion of the GDP, except in two regions, practically it's not relevant in terms of companies, means that those micro companies are also linked to the, as Fernando said, to the type of regulation that we have. And it has to be not only with that, but it also has to be in Spain with the fiscal tax system, which allows you that, and with the protection by the authorities vis-à-vis the big competitive or productive difference that large companies have. But when you take this out and then look at the problem of innovation and efficiency and innovation, I think we don't have that tradition, and this has to be created, probably in some sectors, probably in some regions, but not as a country, because the difference between Spain and the rest of Europe in the statistics is extremely significant. And one thing which is also a real point is not demonstrated is most of us think that innovation is the new word for competitiveness. Instead of talking about cost, competitiveness and productivity, productivity is going to be linked to technology change and innovation. And I think we are losing that trend in Spain because we were very rich not doing that by investing in things which make us to become richer.
Facilitate the access of small and medium enterprises.
The next conference, I think public procurement will be a good topic. Okay, so well, I have to make some announcements. First, I think something was lost in the translation because you said you were giving to the clusters 240 million. I think it's 240,000. So that the EU representatives don't take that into account, and we are much poorer than we seem. Okay. Okay. And so, well, right now you can go over to the lunch. The lunch is offered by Vizcaya Sede, I think, and it's in the restaurante. I haven't written it down, but I think there will be people that will accompany you. At 3, there's a workshop on strategies on the growth and competitive strategies in the Basque Country, so that we can deal with in much more detail. Okay, and sorry for the delay, and it's good to have you all here. Thank you.